It's now time to talk grocery prices, definitely on the minds of all consumers, our customers from the farm. Right now, we are talking to Kevin Grier of Kevin Grier Market Analysis and Consulting, based out of Guelph, Ontario. Kevin, how are you doing today?
Fine, thanks, Sean.
We're going to get to your recent edition of the Grocery Trade Report for February, but I want to start off with this. A lot of news right now. Like you turn on CTV News, CBC News, CNN, Fox News, whatever it is. They're talking about coronavirus. Do you have any sort of sense or things that we should be looking out for in how this potentially impacts food prices going forward if this pandemic or whatever we want to describe it, however it develops, whether it gets worse or we get better from here, what kind of impact do you think it has on the food prices?
Well, as you know, Sean, I spend most of my time with regard to my business on livestock and meat, and as you probably know, this coronavirus has been very, very bad with regard to hog and cattle prices. In my recently completed cattle report, I tabulated the impact on cattle prices of the coronavirus based on my forecast of February versus what actually happened in February, and basically it cost Alberta cattle feeders and Ontario cattle feeders probably about $10 a hundredweight. Tens and tens of millions of dollars lost in the industry because of coronavirus, let alone the impact on the hog sector. So really, the prices last week on the beef were lower, largely because of there's no way packers can get higher prices out of the market when everybody's sitting back and waiting because the futures are down. So really, Sean, I think it's resulting in lower prices for consumers, at least in the meat department.
Yeah, we've seen 2 days of a rebound in the meats after, like you said, last week was just epically horrible, falling knife, and everybody looking for the bottom. So potentially this could be an opportunity for grocers to stock up on some cheaper wholesale prices and maybe pass some of those savings on to the consumer, do you think?
Well, I don't know if they're going to pass them along, but it's certainly is an opportunity on the middle meats in particular. They're very cheap relative to last year, relative to average, and so this would be the time to start perhaps making some deals for those spring features. Easter featuring is already done by now. They've already booked that business, but yeah, it looks like this is a buying opportunity right now.
Okay, let's look at your grocery trade report. What did you see in your analysis of the StatsCan data? What did you see in terms of food prices at this current point in time?
Well, as you and I always talk about, I look at two things that determine the ebb and flow of prices for consumers at the store. One of them is commodity prices. There is, I keep on pointing this out, there is a very strong relationship between commodity prices and the retail prices. I know farmers have a hard time believing that, but there is a relationship between cattle and beef, and there's a relationship between wheat and cookies. So there is no commodity pressure right now at retail. The commodity markets are tepid right now. We just talked about the meats, but also the other markets are not showing any signs of inflation for 2020, at least for the first half of 2020. The other thing I look at is the level of competition. And I look for signals in terms of how hard grocers are competing with each other, because that is a big factor in determining pricing as well. And frankly, I'm kind of surprised what happened in January. January retail prices went up nearly 4% again. And that's after a 3% gain in September. And I was kind of thinking that maybe the competitive intensity was going to ratchet up, because I think that for most of 2019, prices were up about 4%, and that's pretty high. And I thought that the competitive intensity would kick in. Sobeys made some statements about sharpening their pencils, and I started to see some extra strong features out of Walmart. So the fact that prices bounced back again up by 4% in January kind of surprised me, but I'm still looking for lower pricing for the year. When I say lower, more towards that 2% range, because I do believe that they're going to start competing more, and if they don't, they're going to ask for trouble from Costco, Walmart, and maybe even maybe even new entrants into the market.
Yeah, and the reality is, too, you would have to think with growing concerns about the Canadian economy based on some of what's happening globally here right now, that would probably heighten the initiative from grocery stores to get competitive, to try to retain some of that market share. Is that fair?
That is fair. Certainly, you say globally impacting us, but our own ineptitude is doing more than its share in terms of causing trouble in our economy too. So you're absolutely right. A strong economy would signal probably higher prices at retail, but a weak economy would signal the need for competing to bring people into the store, competing for tempting people to come in on the front page of the flyer with attractive pricing, trading down on, instead of say boneless breast, legs, that sort of thing that we did during the big recession of 2009. So you're absolutely right. That's another factor, and frankly, I didn't even think of that.
So let's just stay on that narrative for a second. Demand for protein has definitely been a story. Of course, as we left 2019, we heard so much about ASF and Asia's just pent up demand for protein here as we headed into 2020. Coronavirus has really been the buzzkill of that. Although there is a strong demand still for protein as this passes. If we do see a slowdown domestically in the Canadian economy because of some of those self-inflicted wounds, railway blockade is one example for sure. Do you see a potential for some slowing of demand for some of those proteins here in Canada? I think about beef specifically because it is kind of looked as one of the more expensive proteins.
Yep. Well, let me put it another way, though. In terms of the economy, I'm no better forecasting that than the next person. So I'm still looking at strong beef demand for 2020, and both domestically and globally. And to put it another way, Ted, if we don't get strong demand both domestically and globally, we got a big problem in our hands because of the amount of production that we've got. I've got 20 pork production up 3 to 4% in North America, and I've got beef production up about 2%. And we need strong demand to keep that product moving. And if we don't, we got a big problem on our hands, particularly on the pork side.
A food retailer is not a food retailer is not a food retailer, Kevin. I like when we sort of divide up here. We've got the traditional stores like the Albertsons in the U.S. or Safeway, Sobeys, those kind of those traditional grocery stores versus the Costco, Walmarts, superstores of the world. Who is winning that battle right now? And I know it's not this is kind of an infinite game, not a finite game, but how do you break down that battle right now?
Well, the longer term trend has been these grocers are losing share to Walmart and Costco. StatsCan does produce data on food sales by channel, and they describe one channel as the food and the stores that you just named off, but then also they have the general merchandisers, and the general merchandisers are the Walmarts and the Costcos, and that channel has been growing and growing and growing over the years. And I thought they were maybe taking a break in 2019, but no, by the end of 2019, they were back gaining share again. So the long-term battle is being won by those outlets, and again within the grocery stores themselves, it's the discounters that are gaining share as well. In other words, the No Frills and the Fresh Co's and the Food Basics, those are the channels that are also growing. So the traditional grocers, as I said, they've got their work cut out for them.
What are the flyers telling you right now?
The flyers are saying that this is a time of year in terms of meat demand. The message of the flyers was 2019. I just was astounded by them, how much of a focus there was on beef. And your people that are listening to Real Ag Radio that are in the beef business or cattle production, you gotta tip your hat to grocers, and you gotta tip your hat to what they're doing. You guys are doing for a living, because they obviously think that beef is something that's going to draw people into the store, going from, I think you and I have talked about this, from Victoria Day all the way through to Christmas. If it was a big holiday, if it was a big weekend, beef was on the front page of it. So it is showing that really another thing that came out is that beef prices in Canada have even dipped below U.S. prices. And I think it's because of aggressive featuring. So when I'm looking at flyers, I'm looking at very aggressive featuring on the meats and again, particularly beef.
Yeah, like we've talked about before, those flyers matter. They kind of drop out of the newspaper, and you're sort of like, what is all this? But those flyers matter. They drive people to the store if those features are priced appropriately.
Exactly, and people have been predicting the demise of the flyer. I've been at, for example, Canadian Meat Council meeting, go to that Meat Council meeting, I think it was 20 years ago, somebody was predicting the flyers are a thing of the past, they're going to go the way of the dodo bird, but no, you're right, they are very important, and no matter income level in Canada, we're looking at our flyers, and we're comparing, and we are making our shopping trips based on what we see in the flyer. And again, if that's true, and we have no reason to say that it's not, because, we see it all the time, is that beef is the thing that they're putting on to get you into that store.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Kevin, this has been great. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you again soon.